Let's dive into this Tucker Carlson clip. Now, I haven't watched a whole lot of Tucker Carlson, um, and I haven't watched this specific clip either. I've just been told that it is pretty stellar in terms of the big-brained takes that Tucker Carlson is known for. So let's take a little gander at this and see what kind of what's one of Tucker's talking points today, okay? That's what we'll look at. Just as a fun little thing to start off our shortened stream for the day, okay? Fresh concerns about the effectiveness of masks. Should be good.
The assumption was if you're hiding who you are, you're up to something bad. It made people nervous. By our nature, we want to see each other. We need to see each other. Looking at another person's face is the beginning of connection. Eliminating that connection dehumanizes us.
What? Look, I know this particular kind of mask goes on over the head, but I feel like they probably could have come up with a better image here, but you know what? Okay, we'll let it slide, okay?
That used to be obvious. A century ago, during the Spanish flu pandemic, authorities in many cities in this country passed mandatory mask ordinances, just like the ones we have now.
True.
Many Americans accepted them, but many others did not accept them. In
Very
California,
true.
Citizens rebelled. In January of 1919, 5,000 members of the newly formed Anti-Mask League of San Francisco gathered to call for the mayor's resignation if he didn't repeal his mask order. 5 days later, the mayor complied. Science vindicated that decision in the end. A year later, a study found that compulsory mask use likely had no effect on curbing the Spanish flu.
No, that's not how this works, Tucker Carlson. If everyone had worn their masks, fewer people would have died. But we lacked the ability to tell people to implement compulsory mask legislation. So, like in that example, the mayor should have just said, "Fuck you, wear masks," or face consequences. But instead, our political system in some regards, such as this, is so weak that it actually allows people to just be like, no, we don't want to wear masks. We want to endanger our neighbors. And the government just goes, oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
We live in a very different time. American society, of course, is far less cohesive than it was 100 years ago, and Americans seem far more passive than they did.
What? 100 years ago, black people were under Jim Crow. What? The KKK was at its height 100 years ago, okay? Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Look, I just want you to be aware that, like, almost every step, like, that Tucker Carlson takes, what he'll do in a lot of his big brain segments, right, is he'll start out and he'll list some actual historical facts, like the mask ordinance, like that little bit of a story. However, then he goes the additional step of, like, citing a source without actually, like, giving the source. So, like, oh, a study came out 100 years ago, a year after the mask ordinance was repealed in the 1917 pandemic, saying compulsory mask use wasn't effective. But he won't cite that source, and then he will go on to basically be like, yeah, society was so much more coherent 100 years ago, and he won't clarify what he means by that. And the reason he doesn't clarify is because what he means by it is that we lived in a white supremacist society with less brown people in it. So, like, this is his way of dog whistling. This is a pretty blatant actually. It's pretty big brained and blatant about the racism. So let's keep going, shall we?
Did. Those who disagree with the prevailing orthodoxy have less power than they've ever had. Mass communications are now controlled by a tiny number of people, all of whom have identical agendas.
We have social media now. What the fuck are you talking about, Tucker Carlson? Like, right now, it's easier for individuals to get their message out to the world than it ever has been before. Because before, you know what you needed to get your message out to the world? You needed to go out and buy or, like, homebrew yourself a printing press. And you needed to print out pamphlets. And then you needed to go out and you needed to, like, give people pamphlets or just, like, drop them in the street and, like, get up on, like, a soapbox, a literal soapbox, and start yelling at people who are walking by you, okay? Like, that's what you needed to do back in 100 years ago if you wanted to have, like, social, like, spread your social message, okay? Like, we have, like, teenagers now who amass, by themselves, followings of, like, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, with relatively little effort, I might add. Just because they're charismatic, or they're funny, or they have certain skill sets, they're able to get their own messaging out there quite effectively. So right here, he's talking to old people who don't know what social media is, and is just appealing to, like, this glorious past, right? Because he is a fascist, okay?
There is no modern whom have identical agendas. There is no modern anti-mask league. There couldn't be a modern anti.
There are literally anti-mask groups on Facebook, okay? Like, literally there are groups of people who are against wearing masks. There are literally those things. So, like, saying that an anti-mask league couldn't exist now is utterly ridiculous, because it very clearly does. Very clearly. There are tons of them, okay?
Oh. Mask league. Facebook and Google would shut it down the first day. The governors of Michigan and New Jersey would indict its leaders. Dissent used to be a defining feature of American life, but no more.
Well, also, what is he even arguing about? Like, let's dig deep down to figure out what he's trying to say here. And what he's saying is essentially that you should be able to mobilize politically against a scientific position that is basically saying, hey, if you don't wear a mask, you're gonna kill the people around you. Like, statistically, you're gonna kill somebody. So wear masks, please, because that means less people will die. Like, the leading scientific mind that we have in our government right now has literally said numerous times that if we all wore masks, we would save, like, over 100,000 lives between now and the end of the year. So, like, arguing for this is that we should be able to disagree that masks will save lives because we're some random dipshit who's listening to, I don't know, like, someone big-brained like Alex Jones. And so we should be able then to go and kill the people around us because we believe Alex Jones instead of, like, an actual scientist. So, like, and he's framing that as freedom. He's framing your ability to kill other people through your negligence as your freedom, which is not very smart, okay? Like, this is a take that is deserving of nothing less than complete contempt and derision. Like, the fact that anyone respects Tucker Carlson in the slightest, this, like, rich fancy pants boy who's next in line for $1 billion fortune, who tries to portray himself as a man for the working people while simultaneously, you know, having access to more wealth than any, like, working person could possibly imagine, being front and center the most popular talking head on on cable news, and also complaining about how people like him are silenced all the time, despite, again, him being the biggest talking head on cable news. And like, and his use of this power is to go on to television and to use his platform to talk about how masks are an infringement on your freedoms and that you should be able to not wear masks and kill the people around you, your loved ones, etc. Because that's what freedom means. Absolutely contemptible, and honestly, he deserves nothing but your laughter, okay?
Now we have mandatory consensus. Masks are good. Anyone who questions the utter goodness of masks is bad.
By the way, do you know what a consensus in the scientific community means? It means the majority of scientists are telling you, yeah, like, the science behind this this stance is sound. So, like, you know, like, for example, there are people who disagree with the scientific theory that the world is round. And they disagree with the scientific consensus. But you know what? You know what thinking the world is flat doesn't do? It doesn't get people killed, except for that one guy who built a homemade rocket, okay? But, like, he's a very fringe case. But, like, it doesn't get other people killed. Like, you don't go around thinking the world is flat and that somehow changes the way you live your life in such a way that, like, 2% of the people you come in contact with die, okay? Like, the differences between not agreeing with a scientific consensus on a certain issue change drastically when you're talking about a pandemic. As such, since the consequences change, the way that policies around that scientific consensus are formed need to also change. So, like, there's no government consensus on, like, there are no government policies around, like, whether or not some dipshit in the middle of nowhere is like, yeah, the Earth is flat. Like, no, there's no government policy that's going to be like, okay, you can't go into a store if you think the world is flat, because your belief in that does not affect other people. However, if you go into a store and you're not wearing a mask and it's a packed store, the policies around that should be different, because your non-belief in the pandemic will get other people killed, statistically. So, like, I feel like this is really painfully obvious stuff, and the fact that it needs to even be spelled out because some dipshit on television is saying the most inane garbage is really disheartening, okay?
What they're really telling you is that masks are magic. What appears to be a flimsy cotton...
No! No one is telling you masks are magic. What they're telling you is that if you're wearing a mask, whatever, if it's a cotton mask, which is he's about to, like, talk about how it's a flimsy cotton mask, it's not doing anything. Well, here's the thing. The way the virus spreads, okay? Viruses are very tiny. Viruses are smaller than germs, okay? And you know what viruses do? They get into droplets of water. And you know how, like, if you're in cold weather and you exhale and you can see, like, the fog of your breath come out of your mouth, that fog, little water droplets. That's what that fog is, and that's coming out of your mouth every single time you talk, every single time you breathe. And so, you know what a mask does? If it's a cotton mask, it's not stopping all of those water droplets, but it is stopping around 60% of those water droplets. So you are 60% less likely to transmit COVID-19 to someone else if you happen to have it and are unaware. So, like, masks, even, like, the cloth masks, are actually very effective in cutting down transmission of things like viruses that are airborne. And when a virus is airborne, it's airborne because it's existing in the water molecules that we expel from our mouths, or droplets. Sorry. So there are other better masks that are constructed of sturdier materials that stop 100% of the droplets coming out of your mouth. But they're more expensive and they can be harder to obtain. So these cloth masks are often what a lot of people have. So they're actually very effective at stopping, transmission on a large scale. Meaning, AKA, we could stop 100,000 people from dying between now and the end of the year by just cutting down transmission by 60%, okay? Like, it's not magic, it's just science. Here, you know what? I'll even put up a little GIF. A GIF of how wearing a mask changes the way your breath comes out of your body, and it alters the way like air flows out of your mouth and out of your nose. Okay, so I will find it. I don't have it prepped, but it's a pretty handy visual. Here we go. So here is so when you apply different wavelengths of light to a human body and the surrounding like water droplets, you can see the air currents coming off of a human body. Okay, so here is a good example showing what happens when you're wearing a mask versus what happens when you're not wearing a mask. See that explosion coming out of this man's mouth? That's him talking and breathing, okay? Here's what happens when he does the same thing wearing a mask. Look at, there's no explosion out here. It's just, you can see it kind of come out a little bit, start rising. Yeah, so wearing a mask actually does cut down on transmission, okay? It's not magic, it's literally science.
And face covering is in fact a holy amulet that protects us from disease more reliably than any modern medicine.
The modern doctors are telling us to wear masks, Tucker Carlson, that it's literally modern medicine to wear masks. Like, medicine isn't just like surgery or like taking medicine, like physical pills or injections. Like, medicine is also like lifestyle stuff, like wearing a mask. That can be a factor of modern medicine. So like, this is one of the stupidest things I've seen all day.